The lasting impressions when SummerSlam ended was that DX and The Undertaker were the company's strongest acts. An audience that wasn't that easy exploded for the DX ring entrance, which was K1-like, including a Humvee and a military tank. The show finished with a surprise appearance of The Undertaker, coming from under the ring and choke-slamming CM Punk after he regained the world title in the TLC main event from Jeff Hardy. The main event solidified what had been a good show going in. While not as many stunts as some of the other TLC matches, Jeff Hardy did a swan off the top of a 15-foot ladder onto Punk through a table to set up the finish where both men were injured, but Punk was able to get the title belt first in what is expected to be Hardy's last pay-per-view show for several months. Hardy is pitching a reality show, and depending on how that goes will depend on how quickly he returns. At the time of his leaving, he's the most popular wrestler on the roster. Overall, SummerSlam on August 23rd at a sold-out Staples Center in Los Angeles, drawing 17,129 fans, we'll have actual numbers likely in next week's issue, was a successful show based more on match quality than anything else. Whether people took it as the number 2 show of the year is a different question. If the show is to top 300,000 buys in North America, it would be likely it was due to the DX return, since that's what last year's show did and most shows have dropped this year. Our early feedback, down 18% from last year, isn't an early good sign. The earliest trending numbers are down a little in most major U.S. markets except San Francisco and Los Angeles, with slight decreases in the Northeast, as well as a huge decrease in Canada with the exception of relatively close numbers, but still a decline in Alberta. But anything this early in the game is at best based on very incomplete numbers. My sense was there was more interest in the Royal Rumble, which did 288,000 buys in North America, and all evidence at this point points in the same direction. In a rebuilding period, the general story of the show is the newer talent was there to get a rub while losing to the older talent. Dolph Ziggler had a great opener with Rey Mysterio. I'm not sure people saw him more of a star after losing, but it's doubtful he hurt his cause with management with his performance. Jack Swagger didn't have the time, nor was he put in a position to have a good match with MVP, and he didn't. Crime Time had a good match with Chris Jericho and Big Show. JTG has talent, but I'm not sure of his upside as a single. Should has the size they like but is more limited. Ted DiBiase and Cody Rhodes lost to DX, but the announcers worked hard in trying to get the match over as a classic. It wasn't, but their job is not to call things accurately but to make stars, and what a great performance Legacy had. As far as generally elevated, the strongest has been Punk as a heel world champion. He ended one of the biggest shows of the year with a great match, although on his back. Some felt he should have ended the show looking stronger, but in my mind, for the fans, seeing Undertaker as a surprise was a better ending, and with only 3 weeks between shows, an Undertaker vs. Punk feud needed as quick a start as possible. The next pay-per-view, Breaking Point, on September 13th in Montreal's Bell Center, will be based around submission matches. Randy Orton's title defense against John Cena will be an I Quit match. One would think after Cena being pinned by Orton in 2 straight pay-per-view shows, and pretty much booked to look bad here, that he has to win the next one. Plus, it's not like they have any fresh main events left for Orton given that Mark Henry vs. Orton would die on top and MVP hasn't had a good enough push to be ready. With DX together and working as a team, that seems to temporarily take Shawn Michaels and Triple H out of the picture. Other matches confirmed for the show are Punk vs. Undertaker in a submissions match, Rey Mysterio vs. Dolph Ziggler for the IC title, one would think after 2 straight wins, plus a pinfall on television by Mysterio in a tag, that Ziggler has to win this time, Chris Jericho and Big Show vs. Henry and MVP for the tag titles, and Christian vs. William Regal for the ECW title. You have to figure a DX vs. Legacy as well. Beth Phoenix won a 15-woman battle royal in the dark match. Chavo Guerrero was referee. It came down to Phoenix, Maria, and Eve Torres. After the match, all the women attacked Guerrero. Hornswoggle jumped in to continue it, and then Hornswoggle put Mickie James on his shoulders and carried her around the ring. 1. Rey Mysterio pinned Dolph Ziggler in 12:26 to retain the IC title. With Maria in the Battle Royal, she didn't accompany Ziggler to ringside. The crowd wasn't that hot for the start of this match, but it built well and the crowd was into it big by the end. First big spot was Ziggler throwing Mysterio, who landed on the top rope and came off with a moonsault block. He also did a Hurricane Rana off the apron. Among the big spots were Ziggler doing a press slam into a gut buster for a near fall. Mysterio did a springboard into a perfectly timed dropkick by Ziggler. Ziggler blocked a Toyota roll into a cradle of his own. Ziggler also used a Famouser for a near fall. Mysterio came back with the 619, but missed the springboard splash, and Ziggler used an outside cradle for a 2 count. The finish saw Ziggler standing on the middle rope, putting Mysterio on his shoulders and setting up a super gut buster, but Mysterio reversed it into a Hurricane Rana off the ropes into the ring for the pin. What was notable is that even in Los Angeles, there were a lot of fans cheering Ziggler, with "Let's Go Ziggler" chants. It turned into dueling chants as the kids would then chant 619, almost like it was a Cena match. Strong way to open the show. 3 3/4 stars. 2. MVP pinned Jack Swagger in 6:22. They tried to push this as Swagger as the spoiled college chick and MVP coming up as a hardened ex-con who had to fight his way to a good life. Crowd wasn't much into the match. Really not bad at all, just too short. MVP won clean, I guess because he's moving to a higher spot on the next pay-per-view, using a Chono kick and the Playmaker. 1 3/4 stars. They showed several celebrities during the show. None were big celebrities though. Biggest was Luke Perry. They had Robert Patrick, who was a lead heel carrying the first John Cena movie. In the embarrassing moment of the show, Nancy O'Dell came out to plug her foundation, Betty's Battle, to raise money for ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, better known as the Lou Gehrig disease, research, and the people booed her out of the building. The woman's mother had to fight the disease and she's made it a major cause in her life, and she goes to wrestling. And, well, just wow. I mean, it's one thing to boo an obnoxious celebrity intruder on the product, but talk about not being the time or place. She then interviewed Freddie Prinze Jr., who cut a promo vowing revenge on Randy Orton at a time Orton isn't ready for it. Now, that was annoying. Later celebrities announced included Slash from Guns N' Roses. Tito Ortiz was in the front row, but he didn't make the cut. 3. Chris Jericho and Big Show beat Crime Time, Shad Gaspar and JTG, in 9:42 to retain the tag team titles. Shad pressed Jericho overhead, but then Show speared the hell out of Shad. The next several minutes saw them beat down Shad. Crowd chanted Y2J at Jericho at one point. JTG made the hot tag and go a few near falls until Jericho put JTG in the walls of Jericho. JTG struggled to the ropes, but while the ref was occupied by Jericho, Show nailed JTG with his punch of doom and Jericho got the pin. Better match than it looked on paper. 2 3/4 stars. 4. Kane pinned Great Khali in 5:56. You know things are bad when before the match even starts, Jim Ross makes a reference to bowling shoes. In this case, it was Dick Weber's bowling shoes. Weber was the top bowling star in the 60s and early 70s during a major growth period of that sport, which would mean not only are the shoes old, but the guy in the shoes passed away 4 years ago. Crowd was dead. I mean, there's an excuse to put exceedingly crappy matches on pay-per-view if both guys are over and fans want to see the match. But when fans don't even want to see it, it's like, why waste the time? The most entertaining thing was a "You Can't Wrestle" sign visible on camera that was likely confiscated quickly. Worst brawling ever. Kane survived the deadly Khali chop. Finish grab Ranjan Singh, now Khali's brother. Khali saved him, but in doing so, Kane used a drop kick to the knee followed by a DDT for the pin. By the new Maraska scale, this wasn't half bad. By any other comparisons, it was awful. You would hope this would end the program, but on television they continued it. 1 star. 5. Shawn Michaels and Triple H beat Ted DiBiase and Cody Rhodes in 1959. It was clear that DX was the star of the show live. Pretty similar to the reaction in 1996 when Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels had all the hype in with the main event. And in Los Angeles, well, Anaheim, everyone came to see Ultimate Warrior and a large percentage of the crowd walked out during what is now called a classic main event. They did a K1-style ring entrance. First, a Humvee came out and started shooting. Then DX came out in a military tank. Match itself was good. Mostly the usual DX fare but with a lot of crowd reaction. First back spot was Triple H backdropping Michaels over the top rope, and he landed on Rhodes on the floor. DiBiase gave Triple H a low blow to start the heat spot of the match. Rhodes used a DDT, his former finisher, for a near fall. Michaels got the hot tag. DiBiase and Rhodes took over on Michaels, and Rhodes came off the top with an elbow but missed. Michaels went to the top but Rhodes slugged him and Michaels crotched himself on the top turnbuckle. Michaels came back and went for an elbow off the top, but Rhodes got his knees up. Michaels came back again and had the figure 4 on in the middle but DiBiase saved. The finish of the match saw Rhodes and Michaels as the legal men. Triple H gave Rhodes a pedigree while DiBiase gave Michaels the Dream Streets, which is a Cobra suplex. Triple H and DiBiase were fighting outside the ring. Rhodes and Michaels were both selling being out, but Michaels super kicked Rhodes out of nowhere for the win. 3 stars half. 6. Christian retained the ECW title, pinning William Regal in '08 with the kill switch. What a waste this was, as on paper it looked to be one of the better matches on the show, and when they were given time to do a match 2 days later they had a very good one. After the match, Ezekiel Jackson laid out Christian and dropped him on his head with a urinage. Vladimir Kozlov used an Iron Curtain Slam. Regal then put Christian in the Regal Stretch. 7. Randy Orton retained the WWE title over John Cena in 2044 in an overbooked mess of a match. They took a concept from the past and tried to add to it, but in adding, subtracted greatly. Jerry Lawler made a remark that while Rogers must have never met Randy Orton, Rogers had a famous quote saying, "I never met a man I didn't like," and former television announcer Boyd Pierce had his own version of it, "Will Rogers never met Fritz von Erich." Cena was booed here a lot. Funny because the last time WWE came to Los Angeles, Cena was heavily cheered. Orton had a bloody mouth. The crowd did the dueling chants. "Let's go Cena, let's go Orton." Then came a terribly overbooked finish that left you never wanting to see them again and making Cena look like he's protected by management and still not competent enough to win. As Storm made a comeback, Orton shoved referee Scott Armstrong and got out of the ring and was disqualified at 13:30. Lillian Garcia announced that the winner and new champion, Randy Orton. What a mess that announcement was. The timekeeper blew his stack, although that didn't air on television. Garcia had to rephrase, saying that Cena won via DQ but Orton keeps the title, but Vince McMahon was ordering it to be restarted. And if Orton was to get disqualified, he'd lose the title. They wrestled for 2:02 and then Orton got up and left, getting counted out. Garcia then announced Vince had Cena won via count but he was still the champion. Next Orton got the pin with his feet on the ropes in 17. At this point it was getting ridiculous. A second ref came in and then they restarted the match again. Cena had Orton in the STF. At that point, a supposed fan, Brett DiBiase, Ted's younger brother, who will become a regular on Raw, jumped on ref Armstrong. It was an obvious plant because of everyone's reaction. Then it was restarted again. This time Orton snapped Cena's neck on the top rope, hit the RKO, and got the pin. The finish pretty much ruined the match. 1 restart always works. 2 usually works. At 3, you've turned it into a clown show. And they did 4 here. Obviously the idea was to build the I Quit match but nothing here really did that. 2 stars. 8. CM Punk won the world title from Jeff Hardy in a TLC match in 1940. As Hardy brought in the first ladder, the crowd started chanting, "We want tables." Punk dropped Hardy with a backbreaker on a chair. Hardy came back with several chair shots until missing a plancha. Punk was on a ladder and tried to go to sleep, but Hardy reversed it into a sunset flip off the ladder. Hardy was climbing and Punk knocked over the ladder. Hardy was to crotch himself on the top rope, but missed and landed too much on one side and could have torn his groin. Punk came back with a crazy move, giving Hardy a superplex off the top rope onto a ladder lying on the ground. They both fell from several feet in the air onto their backs on a ladder. Hardy did a twist of fate and went for the swanton, but Punk got his knees up. Hardy threw Punk over the top rope through a table encountering a bulldog headlock. Punk came back and put a chair on Hardy's head to throw him into the post to redo the injury spot on SmackDown. Hardy blocked it and threw Punk's shoulder into the post. Hardy used 4 chair shots, and then nailed Punk with a television monitor. No juice, even hard way out of that one. Punk was laid out on the announcer's table when Hardy climbed up a 15-foot high ladder for a swanton. Both sold the blow huge. EMTs and trainers came out. In a trivia note, one of the EMTs was a local indie ref who was the ref used in the Hogan Celebrity Wrestling television show. They teased the idea that the match was over as they worked on both. Punk rolled into the ring. Hardy was on a stretcher wearing a neck brace when he got up off the stretcher and took off the neck brace. Both were climbing a ladder and Punk punched Hardy off and grabbed the title belt to win. After the match, Undertaker came from under the ring to choke slam Punk and end the show. As for the match, they didn't do as many knocking off the ladder spots or things like the teeter-totter spot that is in almost every ladder match. Not an all-time classic ladder match, but still an excellent main event to cap off the show. 4 1/4 stars. UFC heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar's second title defense will be November 21st in Las Vegas against fellow powerhouse wrestler Shane Carwin. Carwin, 11-0, has beaten everyone put in front of him in 2-11 or less, 6 by knockout or TKO, and 5 by submission. At 6'2" and 260 pounds, with a stellar collegiate wrestling background, he would pose the toughest power and style challenge of Lesnar's short career. Carwin had been scheduled to face Cain Velasquez on October 24th, at the Staples Center in Los Angeles in what UFC President Dana White had billed as a match to determine Lesnar's next challenger. "Brock is ready to go now and wants to fight," said White. "Carwin makes the most sense. He's 11-0 and he's been kicking the shit out of everybody. Gonzaga destroyed Crow Cop and he, Carwin, totally destroyed Gonzaga. Plus, he hates Brock Lesnar." Velasquez was told on August 20th that the fight was off because Carwin was being moved to face Lesnar, and by the end of the day, a deal had been reached for him to face Ben Rothwell. Rothwell had originally been booked on the Los Angeles event to face Chase Gormley. Gormley now faces Stefan Struve, 17-3, the 6'11" native of Denmark. Rothwell vs. Gormley had been booked, a match first made by Affliction for its August 1st show. The story behind the change in UFC plans stems from a number of reasons. Lesnar had minor undisclosed surgery after his fight with Mir and at first had talked of wanting to take time off, but had given UFC word that he was ready earlier. At the same time, with UFC planning 4 shows in October and November, and with Georges St. Pierre out of action with an abductor tear, and Lyoto Machida already booked to headline the October 24th show in Los Angeles, they were short headliners. The original idea would have been in theory for BJ Penn vs. Diego Sanchez and Anderson Silva vs. Dan Henderson to headline the 2 November shows, both in title matches. But in wanting to add another show likely to go on Spike Head-Up with Fedor Emelianenko's debut on Strikeforce, which is why Strikeforce has likely delayed in announcing a date and venue, they needed all hands on deck. Penn this week agreed to fight in the main event of the November 14th show in Manchester, England, with his lightweight title defense against Sanchez. UFC had not officially announced the match at press time, but Penn vs. Sanchez, if finalized, would be part of a double headliner with Michael Bisping vs. Dennis Kang. That date looks to be the second UFC vs. Boxing war after September 19th, a free Spike special going against the Manny Pacquiao vs. Miguel Cotto pay-per-view boxing match in Las Vegas, which is considered the biggest boxing match left this year. Last year, after Penn beat Joe Stevenson in a UK show, he had talked about not wanting to fight any longer on UK shows because his bonus money comes from pay-per-view, and the UK shows did significantly lower numbers on pay-per-view. Obviously, UFC must have made it worth his while because he's not only taking a UK show, but doing it on free TV. Silva has complained about Henderson as a next opponent, and has made it clear he doesn't want to face Henderson because he already holds a convincing win against him and doesn't feel he should have to face him again. He has said that he wants the Damian Maia vs. Nate Marquardt winner on August 29th to then face Henderson to determine the top contender. Still, UFC is pushing for both fights during the time period. At the point when Lesnar agreed to fight, every top UFC heavyweight was already booked. There was no way to pull Randy Couture, who would have drawn the best against Lesnar, since he's main eventing on August 29th on a show built around him. Czech Congo is coming off a loss to Velasquez, and after being soundly beaten, Frank Mir needed an impressive win or two before being put back in with Lesnar. Couture hadn't fought since losing the title, so the decision came down to Carwin or Velasquez. Both had one name win on their resume, and Carwin beat Gabriel Gonzaga in 109 via knockout, while Velasquez's biggest win, over Congo, was by decision. Carwin also had more wins, so he got the nod. There are several business positives, including getting another Lesnar driven by rate before the end of the year, and provided Velasquez beats Rothwell, instead of Lesnar facing just the winner of Velasquez vs. Carwin, he could conceivably face both. Carwin has been the most vocal of the UFC heavyweight contenders in being critical of Lesnar's actions after UFC 100. After retaining his title over Frank Mir in the biggest MMA event in US history, Lesnar got an opponent Frank Mir's face, causing officials to jump between them, flipped off the audience that booed him heavily the entire fight, insulted UFC's main sponsor, Bud Light, and did a pro wrestling-inspired interview. He hates Brock Lesnar, said White. It's going to be 2 huge guys going at it. He's got the power to knock anybody out, and he's got great wrestling too. He's one of the guys that has the size to match up with Brock, too. This is one of those fights that could be wild. Someone's going to get their head knocked off. The flipping off of the fans that just lined your pocket with millions of dollars is just lame, said Carwin after the fight. He may be a champion, but he has a long ways to go before he earns the respect of a champion. The fans are why we do this, Brock. This sport is not about fat paychecks and drama. It is about hard work and sacrifice for a shot to do what you did that night. It doesn't matter how much money you make if you can't earn your peers' respect and the respect and love of the greatest sporting fans in the world. Still, the public at large doesn't believe Carwin stands a chance. An Observer poll saw 86% believe Lesnar would win. The first odds out started with Lesnar at plus 180, but all betting came in on Lesnar to the point the line is now plus 290, before money started to even out. Lesnar vs. Carwin would headline a show that would include the return of Tito Ortiz, facing UFC Hall of Famer Mark Coleman. Carwin also played the pro wrestling card. The profession Lesnar garnered celebrity status in between 2002 to 2004, which seemed to get under Lesnar's skin when played in prior matches by Heath Herring and Mir, the former of whom Lesnar mocked after beating. "We have no scripts in this sport, no predetermined earning amount and no predetermined outcomes," he wrote. "It doesn't matter if you win or lose. It matters how you win or lose." Carwin, 34, is probably the closest athletic equivalent to Lesnar in MMA. Both are huge men with strong backgrounds in wrestling as well as heavy powerlifting. Lesnar was Division I national champion at the University of Minnesota in 2000. Carwin competed at the Division II level for Western College in Gunnison, Colorado, where he was 1999 national champion, along with placing second in 1996 and 1997, and was twice an All-American linebacker in football. Lesnar is more freakishly large, although Carwin early in his MMA career fought as heavy as 290 pounds, and jacked up at that weight looked very similar to the 295-pound WWE version of Lesnar. He is right now training at about 280 pounds. Lesnar has a larger bone structure and is a little taller. Since Carwin figured to have the power edge in his previous fights, that was part of the reason he may have come in lighter due to cardio, since he was counting on a power edge, which may not be the case here. Lesnar figures to come into the cage around his usual 275 to 280 pounds, cutting the day before. Carwin may come in near that if he trains for power, and would at most be giving up 15 or so pounds. Lesnar has never fought anyone who can give him a real test when it comes to size and power. Carwin has fought guys bigger than himself, but has never fought someone who is as good, if not a better wrestler than he is. From a size, power, and wrestling standpoint, it is a significantly tougher test than either man has faced thus far in their careers. It's two guys who have made it this far largely by being able to bully their opponents. Carwin has faced brief moments of adversity, while Lesnar faced a few seconds of such, but neither has ever been in a position where they were tested as far as ability to come back from being dominated. At that time, before Lesnar had gotten into the sport, but when speculation of him trying it abounded, Carwin was talked of as an example of what Lesnar could be with a combination of size, power, speed, unique athletic talents with a high-caliber wrestling background. By his background, Carwin would pose the toughest style threat on Lesnar to date, because if his wrestling is good enough to stop Lesnar from taking him down, while neither are great technical strikers, Carwin would appear to have an advantage and pack the harder punch. More likely in a standing battle with guys of that power, it would come down to who landed first. Of course, the same can be said for Carwin, who has managed to blow out most of his opponents with takedowns and aggressive ground and pound. Lesnar and Carwin are both largely untested on their back, and Carwin has only been taken down once in his career, with Gonzaga, who he got up and beat. Lesnar has never been on his back, although Randy Couture was competitive with him from a wrestling standpoint, although as far as technical ability in wrestling goes, Couture would be at a level above both men, just far smaller. From a credentials standpoint, Division I wrestling is a level above Division II, but that is also a decade ago and a lot could change. Carwin has more experience, although not against better competition, and he's been doing MMA longer, debuting 4 years ago as a protege of former pro wrestler Ron H. 20 Waterman. Nate Marquardt, who has trained with Carwin, who both train in high altitude in Denver, said that cardio would not be a problem with Carwin. He said even though he's never had to show it, Carwin's cardio is excellent. Lesnar's cardio for a long fight is also untested when it comes to someone who is near his size and has wrestling ability. He had no problems with cardio in any fights to date, even though Joe Rogan on the air was claiming he was tiring just before he knocked out Couture. But with Couture, who tested him in wrestling, it was over early in round 2. Heath Herring, who Lesnar went 3 rounds with, couldn't test him when it came to wrestling. However, Lesnar's training camp consists of a number of 300-pound wrestlers, who are younger and better wrestlers than Carwin, so Carwin from a wrestling standpoint is unlikely to do anything from a wrestling standpoint to him that Lesnar doesn't face in training. Carwin's wrestling ability is such that even if he is taken down, he wouldn't likely be controlled and dominated without being able to get up just through sheer power, like Lesnar was able to do in his fights with Herring and the second fight with Mir. Carwin is most dangerous for a strong right hand that felled Gabriel Gonzaga, Christian Wellish, and Neil Wayne in his 3 UFC outings. His record for quick wins is impressive, but it also has only included one top-level heavyweight, Gonzaga, at UFC 96 on March 7 in Columbus, Ohio. Carwin showed both good and bad signs in that fight. He was taken down immediately, and had his nose broken from a punch, which required surgery that kept him out of action for several months. But seconds later, when he connected on Gonzaga standing, the match was over in just 1:09. Lesnar 4-1, the sport's ultimate heel, has replaced the retired Oscar de la Hoya as the biggest pay-per-view draw in combat sports, putting up big numbers in all 4 of his UFC fights. From a business standpoint, this makes sense on several levels. Had the Carwin vs. Velasquez winner gotten the next shot, as White had talked about, Lesnar wouldn't be available to fight until Super Bowl weekend at the earliest. Carwin vs. Velasquez would also eliminate the loser from possible contention, and there was criticism of that match when it was first made for that reason, but the reason it was made was to determine which of the 2 somewhat untested but unbeaten heavyweights was most deserving of the shot. Another aspect is that White is almost surely going to want to book something against Fedor Emelianenko's debut with Strikeforce in October or November. They had 2 major matchups timed for November, which were BJ Penn vs. Diego Sanchez for the lightweight title and Anderson Silva vs. Dan Henderson for the middleweight title, but could need 3 shows, since there will be a November 14th show in Manchester, England, on Spike, the pay-per-view on November 21st, and probably another Spike date against Strikeforce. With Lyoto Machida on October 24th, he was unavailable, and Georges St. Pierre is mending his torn abductor muscle and won't be available until January at the earliest. With so many shows, it made sense to move Lesnar up to November. This may lead to January as a trouble period with big shows scheduled for both halves as the traditional New Year's show in Las Vegas and January 30th as the traditional Super Bowl weekend event in Las Vegas. The heavyweight division, as far as depth goes, is the strongest in the history of the company, even with failing to sign Fedor Emelianenko. Besides Velasquez, in the wings as title contenders in early 2010 would include winners of the August 29th fight in Portland, Oregon, with former champions Randy Couture and Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, as well as the winner of a September 19th fight in Dallas, with Mirko Cro Cop vs. Junior Dos Santos. Bryan Danielson has reached an agreement to join WWE. Danielson, 28, arguably the best technical wrestler in the world over the past several years, was the top star in Ring of Honor for much of the promotion's 7-year history. When Danielson didn't renew his contract several months back when they were trying to lock people up long-term after signing the HDNet deal, the WWE was always considered a possibility. Over the past week, WWE has gone after some Ring of Honor talent, because most were under contract. There were limited moves that could be made at one time, with the word being it was due to HDNet moving Ring of Honor television to Mondays, which WWE considered their night. Ring of Honor reported that Danielson will work its September dates as scheduled, with New York on September 26th being his farewell show. With Ring of Honor having its financial issues and Pro Wrestling Noah booking fewer foreigners, his prospects for next year as an independent wrestler were uncertain. He also had dates for Dragon Gate USA, where he was scheduled in the main event of the September 6th show in Chicago against Naruki Doi. He was also scheduled to do an angle going forward that was significant to that promotion, that has to be changed or done by someone else. Danielson was named the Observer's Most Outstanding Wrestler for the 3rd straight year this past year, and had been voted Best Technical Wrestler for 4 straight years. He had consistently had probably more great matches of the past few years than anyone on the U.S. wrestling scene. But at about 5'8" and 185 pounds, he's small by WWE standards. With the exception of Rey Mysterio, nobody in that size range has ever truly gotten to be a top star in the company. The Danielson situation is unique. He had signed with WWE in 2000 coming out of the old Shawn Michaels wrestling school, where he, Brian Kendrick and Lance McNaught, Lance Cade, were the top graduates, although he picked things up the quickest. When Michaels attempted to run a local regional promotion out of San Antonio with television, it was clear that his top star and best wrestler from day one was the masked American Dragon. With the wrestling war hot and heavy and both WWE and WCW being aggressive at first signing any prospect, WWE put him under a developmental deal. After Michaels folded his promotion due to financial losses, Danielson was sent to a WWF developmental promotion in Memphis, where he became a protege of William Regal. When WWF pulled out of Memphis, he was among the list of those cut, which was a controversial decision at the time. While he would have become one of the top stars of the underground independent scene no matter what, his springboard to stardom in Ring of Honor was winning the King of Indies tournament in Vallejo, California, in 2001. That show was responsible for the formation of Ring of Honor when Rob Feinstein and Gabe Sapolsky saw how much great talent there was and felt they could create a niche promotion with it. Danielson was the lone headliner with the company since its debut in 2002, being in the main event of the company's first show and having a 15-month reign as champion from September 17, 2005 to December 23, 2006. Because he didn't sign a new contract, he was largely used to build the top guys, in particular champion Austin Aries and leading contender Tyler Black. When Danielson didn't sign, it was because he wanted options open to take a sabbatical from the promotion and had talked about going to Thailand to train in Muay Thai, but it also gave him the option to go to either WWE or TNA if they showed interest. Ring of Honor announced a final countdown tour with Danielson, which would be the TV tapings on September 10th and September 11th in Philadelphia, the September 18th show in Dayton, September 19th in Chicago, September 25th in Boston, where he'll face Davey Richards, and the final farewell on September 26th at the Manhattan Center, which is expected to sell out. The problem is that his style works best in long matches, and in WWE, unless you are a headliner, you don't get long matches. His size and look will make it difficult to be a headliner in WWE. He easily could wind up as a prelim-level wrestler similar to Jamie Noble, who has a more comedic personality but whose size has doomed him from really getting anywhere in WWE. Danielson's style is based on incorporating both legitimate moves from MMA and melding several different styles of pro wrestling such as a touch of European and heavy Japanese-oriented. It's the perfect style for Ring of Honor fans, but in many ways it's the opposite of the WWE style, which is geared toward a more limited set of moves that are already over. Ring of Honor style is based on innovation and WWE style is based on familiarity with the audience. Danielson would have been a better fit for TNA a few years back. For whatever reason, when TNA was emphasizing the X division, the people in charge saw Danielson as lacking charisma and never made an all-out effort to get him. Today, since the X division guys have largely been either on a treadmill going nowhere for years, or in many cases, are less over than they were years ago, and it has not been emphasized, on the surface he's not the type of wrestler they would push, just based on them never making a big play. Losing Danielson hurts Ring of Honor in that its audience can no longer claim they have the best wrestler in the world. Ever since Samoa Joe was no longer allowed to appear with the group by TNA, Danielson has been the backbone of the company and its most valuable performer. The company had been careful not to build everything around him, which would have been an easy decision. There was a lot of talk since losing the title of giving him a second title run, because his first run was so outstanding and he was the best guy for the role of Ring of Honor World Champion. But there were thoughts it would be a rerun and nothing new, and then of late, without being under contract, it was probably not seriously considered. The loss is major to the promotion. But the success or failure of Ring of Honor is going to come down to whether or not they can make enough money to survive based on foreign television deals. For Danielson, at this stage of the game, because the style he's expected to do on the indie scene is tough physically, it's probably the best business move. He was able to make a living for years while being able to do the style of wrestling that he likes, but at his age, it does become the time when you have to think about being able to make a good living with your talent. But the jury is very much out on where his career goes from here. Plenty of great independent wrestlers don't make it on the big stage, sometimes because the crowds don't take to them, and just as often because they don't fit management's notion of marketable, which in WWE is often a very narrow vision. Just the fact he was this good for so long with neither major promotion beating down his door tells you that none of the major decision makers in the sport have been sold on him, even though he's a superstar at the level he's been working at for years. From a WWE standpoint and the perfect example, Danielson is best reminiscent of the kid in one of the seasons of Tough Enough who was in the best condition at the tryouts but only made it as an alternate, and then won all the physical drills and picked up wrestling the quickest, and was still cut early because he wasn't big and looked too much like a normal person. WWE is very much about taking people who they feel have a good look for television, like most avenues in Hollywood, and then teaching them to wrestle and act. The mentality is not about getting people over who are outstanding at performing and wrestling. However, fans can dictate things to a degree. WWE did make people like Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit into major stars, but all had the advantage of coming in with established names with a major national rival promotion. Without it, Mysterio would not have had a chance coming in cold. CM Punk largely made it on fan reaction, but comparisons with Danielson are unfair even though both started as independent stars and made names in Ring of Honor. Danielson is a far superior wrestler, but Punk has a unique look and more. Punk's best trait is he has great confidence in himself and it carries over to his promos. It's the same reason he gets so much heat in the locker room, because of the idea that, what has he proved to act so confident? But if he didn't have that confidence, he'd have never made it in wrestling to begin with. I'd be shocked if Danielson got any of that heat. He's easy to get along with and his reputation is he's fantastic to work with. But he will still have to overcome the idea that he works independent style, or appearing too confident based on what he's done in wrestling, when in WWE, none of that matters and can even be held against you with the idea of forces wanting to prove you weren't as good as your hype. Still, I'm confident he'll survive that aspect, but whether he'll be given the opportunities, the jury is out. Even though fans picked Evan Bourne right away to be a star, from a booking standpoint, he's not been pushed anywhere near the level of his crowd response, and he is more spectacular in ways a more casual audience would see due to his great flying moves. Danielson's best bet would be to put into a tag team where he would get regular television exposure, and then sneak over on talent, in some ways like Bret Hart did in Another Generation. It's not a lock as that didn't work for Paul London and Brian Kendrick, even though they had a run where they were a great tag team. My sense is he'll be someone who takes time to click with the audience, and it is entirely possible he'll never get the chance, and there's always the risk of being remade with a career-making or career-breaking gimmick. But if he were to get the opening, he's probably someone who, barring injury, can have a long run and slowly his talent can rise him to a good level. _A second biggest show, Verano de Escándalo, Summer Scandal, on August 21st in Ciudad Madero, was a mixed bag as an event. Even though business hasn't been strong of late for the promotion, the show drew a sellout 17,000 fans to the convention center, which included an angle bringing Conan back as a heel to revive his feud with Joaquin Roldan, as well as the return of the original Granda, a one-time huge draw who was an absolutely horrible worker. However, Booker Dorian Roldan is going to get his wish in doing the original Granda versus second Granda feud, which will be some of the worst wrestling this side of Jenna Maraska. The negative is the show was so long, as the main event didn't get into the ring until near 1 a.m., that a lot of the big matches at the end saw a worn-out audience and little heat. Conan's new heel foreign group will include Alex Koslov, Teddy Hart, Joe Leder, Nicho, Il Restaurant's women wrestlers Rain, Peyton Banks in TNA, and Nikki Roxy in TNA, Jennifer Blake and valet Nikki, Hart's girlfriend who has returned. The original plan was to bring Roxy in as a babyface, but when they saw her with short hair, they thought she'd be better as a heel foreigner. 1. The Psycho Circus kept their 21-month winning streak alive, beating La Yakuza of Kenzo Suzuki and Sugi-san and Oriental. 2 of the Clown have had a name change. Killer Clown is now Murder Clown, which is a stupid name, and Zombie Clown is now Monster Clown. Psycho Clown is still the same. I'm guessing there has never been a less over act in history that has won for 21 straight months, and are still working big show openers. 2. In the best match on the show, Alex Koslov won the AAA Cruiserweight title in a 5-way match over Extreme Tiger, Teddy Hart, Jack Evans, and Rocky Romero. Mostly a good spot fest. Hart has been criticized for trying to do too many moves, do moves in a manner that doesn't make sense as a heel, and for always wanting to get his stuff in. Some have also complained Hart works great with Evans, his best friend, but not so great with the rest. But he has been improving as a worker since he arrived. The finish saw Hart distract the ref, allowing Koslov to hit Tiger, who came into the match as champion, with a low blow. 3. Granda and Elohio won a non-title match over AAA tag champs Nicho and Joe Leder. After the match, the original Granda showed up. He had destroyed his pancreas due to use of steroids, and came back, and you guessed it, he was gigantic, although not as big and ripped as he was 5 years ago. Even though he was a major draw, he didn't get that big of a reaction. 4. Silver King, who was back wrestling with his mask on, and Electroshock and Ultimo Gladiator beat Octagon and La Parka and Marco Corleone. With the referee distracted, Silver King pulled off Parka's mask and pinned him. 5. Charlie Manson beat Chessman in a street fight. Lots of weapons including light tubes. Manson got Chessman in a submission and Chessman wouldn't tap. Manson grabbed his hand and tapped the mat 3 times and the referee stopped it. Chessman protested the finish. 6. Arrow Star and Fabi Apache beat Billy Boy and Sexy Star, and the last person in the cage loses either their mask, Arrow Star or Sexy Star, or hair, Fabi or Billy Boy. It came down to Fabi, a woman, against Billy, with both climbing to the top of the cage, but Fabi hit the floor first and Billy got his head shaved. After the match, when Conan came out, he had a confrontation with Fabi, and his women, Roxy, Rain and Blake, all attacked Fabi. Esther Moreno was sitting there with Mary Celopena, Antonio's sister, at ringside and also got involved. 7. Dr. Wagner Jr. retained the AAA Super Mega Heavyweight title in a 3-way over Cibernetico and Macias, also in a cage. The rules were the first elimination was via pinfall, but when it was down to the last 2, they were playing escape the cage rules. Macias put Cibernetico through a table and pinned him, leaving Macias versus Wagner Jr. They had another good exchange of moves. Match really picked up with Cybernetico out. Macias was climbing the cage, but Silver King and Electroshock stopped him from getting out. Wagner Jr. then used a Michinoku driver on Macias and escaped to win. The match was nowhere near the level of the great Wagner Jr. vs. Macias match at Triple Mania. The battle between UFC and Golden Boy Promotions has heated up over the past week, stemming from a head-to-head battle on September 19th. The two sides already squared off earlier this year when on the same night, Golden Boy promoted a boxing show on HBO, was involved in the promotion of an Affliction pay-per-view, and UFC countered with airing the Brock Lesnar vs. Randy Couture UFC 91 show that night on Spike TV. UFC and Spike made the decision to air a commercial-free hour live on Spike TV on September 19th from UFC 103 in Dallas. They will air the Efren Escudero vs. Cole Miller and Drew McFedries vs. Tomasz Derval fights from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern and 6 to 7 p.m. Pacific Time. The reason is because the boxing pay-per-view headlined by Floyd Mayweather Jr. vs. Juan Manuel Marquez starts at 9 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Pacific. It won't really affect the UFC pay-per-view broadcast because they had booked 13 fights on the show, so even with airing those 2 live fights, if the main card fights go short, they still have 6 other non-televised fights to choose from to fill time. Golden Boy has countered in a number of ways, including loading up the undercard, with unbeaten WBA featherweight champion Chris John vs. Olympic silver medalist Rocky Juarez, WBO interim lightweight championship decided with Michael Katsidis vs. Vicente Escobedo, plus Zab Judah vs. Antonio Diaz. They also struck a deal to air Mayweather vs. Marquez in 170 movie theaters around the U.S., besides the usual restaurants and sports bars, many of which are choosing to air UFC because UFC draws more at establishments than boxing, and UFC is charging a lower price. While not announced, they are looking at charging a far cheaper price at the movie theaters than for the pay-per-view, charging a price just slightly more than a first-run movie as opposed to the $49.95 pay-per-view price the UFC runs at its usual $44.95 price. Golden Boy has also signed a deal to where the hype specials will not only air on HBO, debuting August 29th at 10:15 p.m., or head-to-head with UFC 102 in most of the country, but also on Fox Sports Net, running from August 26th to September 11th. That means Spike will be doing a live card on September 16th, the free hour 3 days later, as well as being in the beginning of the Ultimate Fighter season on September 16th. Spike has to advertise all of them, which means some will get lost in the promotional shuffle, and it's doubtful it'll be Ultimate Fighter, which is expected to do big ratings this season, built around Kimbo Slice and the Rashad Evans vs. Quinton Jackson dynamic. The hour-free prelims on the pay-per-view is something that WWE used to have in the past for years with the pre-pay-per-view heat shows, and TNA did it as well. The fact that neither group does it anymore, TNA did try it again recently, says that they must not have seen any effect of it on adding to the buy rate. This is really the second UFC versus boxing major head-to-head meeting, with the first being in 2006 when UFC did Georges St. Pierre versus Matt Hughes, which did 500,000 buys, and boxing had a pay-per-view with Manny Pacquiao versus Eric Morales, which did 350,000 buys. As much as pro wrestling has been on the decline in Japan for years, one thing about that country is that more different companies are able to draw for a big event there than anywhere else. In an amazing attendance figure, the DDT promotion, which isn't even a top 5 promotion in the country, drew 8,865 fans to Sumo Hall in Tokyo on August 23rd for a 6-hour live show. That figure is more than New Japan usually does in the building unless it's the final night of the G1 Climax tournament, and more than Pro Wrestling Noah or WWE did in their last trips to Tokyo playing at the larger Budokan Hall. In addition, they pulled that number without papering. Largely what drew the number is simply the idea that DDT, short for Dramatic Dream Team, a company that has been alive for 12 years, was running such a large building, and in Tokyo, the idea of that caught on. It was just the idea if they were running such a big building it would have to be the biggest show in its history. The company is known for running much smaller shows, with a combination of high-flying, hardcore and comedy styles, including doing such things as having an invisible man wrestler, and having inanimate objects like stuffed dolls and baseball bats hold championships. Even though pro wrestling is far stronger economically in the US, it is really only one company that can ever hope to draw big crowds. TNA, the number 2 company, has never drawn a crowd this large, and it's inconceivable anyone else could even come close to 1/3 that number. Being able to do this kind of a crowd when hustle, using big names, celebrities and with far more publicity and exposure, or the Inoki Genome Federation, also using big names, can't, is an amazing accomplishment and probably the single most impressive attendance figure for any promotion in the world this year. They immediately announced a July 25, 2010 return, so the mentality seems to be thinking they can build up one giant show per year. On a pecking order, DDT is not even considered a top 5 promotion in Japan, and would really be closer to a Combat Zone Wrestling or Pro Wrestling Guerrilla than even a Ring of Honor, let alone a TNA, even though none of those companies could ever draw anywhere close to this level. And this is a promotion that in Tokyo never comes close to selling out Korakuen Hall, and at least at their peaks, CZW could sell out the arena in Philadelphia, and Ring of Honor has packed the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York. And they did so with few major names, as the only major outside star was Masahiro Chono. The main event on the show had Kota Ibushi, the company's top wrestler and one of the most spectacular wrestlers in the world right now, challenging and winning the company's top title, the KOD belt, beating Hiroshima in the main event to take the title. Ibushi, who has stolen the show on occasions when he was brought to the US for Ring of Honor, garnered popularity outside of his regular group when appearing on many Budokan Hall shows for Pro Wrestling Noah, and was also in this year's Best of the Super Junior tournament with New Japan. The only comments we heard was that 6 hours was too long and the audience got tired, but that overall it was considered a good show. 1. Takao Soma and Keisuke Ishii and Yukihiro Abe beat Gota Ihashi and Tomokazu Taniguchi and Shigeru Irie in 12:41 when Soma, in his debut match, pinned Ihashi after a Hurricane Rana. 2. Yoshihiko pinned Toru Owashi to win a Royal Rumble for the Iron Man Heavy Metal title in 2010. 3. Munenori Sawa and Mitsuya Nagai beat Hoshitango and Tanamusaku Toba in 13:13 when Sawa pinned Toba. 4. Danshoku Dino retained the DDT Extreme title, pinning Masa Takanishi in 1926 with the Danshoku Destroyer. Dino is a cult favorite, doing a hardcore gay character. 5. Sanshiro Takagi, who started the promotion, pinned Great Sasuke in 21:52 in a weapons match. Among the weapons being used were a bicycle, both men's wives, and a casket. Takagi won with a Himawari bomb, which is a sit-down version of a power bomb. 6. Masahiro Chono beat Poison Sawada in 17:13 after a brainbuster. 7. Yasu Urano and Kuda won a four-way to win the KOD tag title over Francesco Togo and Pizza Michinoku, Jun Kasai and Mikami and Kenny Omega and Mike Angel from Winnipeg in 23 minutes when Urano pinned Michinoku. 8. Kota Ibushi pinned Hiroshima in 25:29 to win the KOD title with a semi-suplex. This is a move that starts with a high last ride style power bomb. But at the top, Ibushi held Hiroshima, changed his arms to a double underhook position, threw him over in a bridge like a Northern Lights suplex or a Japanese Ocean Cyclone suplex for the pin. Just a quick note regarding the birth of my first daughter and second child, Carly Ann Meltzer, who was born on August 22 at 10:14 p.m. My wife, who is one of the most wonderful people in the world, went through a very difficult last several months with a lot of hospital visits, but she handled the situation wonderfully. Carl von Bronner. Title History Editions. NWA Pacific Northwest Heavyweight, as Doug Donovan, Def. Herb Freeman, August 9, 1957, lost to Kurt von Himmler October 14, 1957. NWA Pacific Northwest Tag Team, as Doug Donovan, with Ivan Kamaroff, Def. Luther Lindsay and George Doucette, June 11, 1955, lost to Luigi Massera and Gory Guerrero July 25, 1955, with Ivan Kamaroff, Def. Luigi Massera and Gory Guerrero August 26, 1955, lost to Luigi Massera and Dick Toria September 19, 1955, with Red Donovan, Def. Herb Freeman and Larry Shen May 27, 1956, lost to Herb Freeman and Pepper Gomez June 28, 1956, with Red Donovan, Def. Herb Freeman and Cowboy Carlson August 7, 1957, lost to Kurt von Himmler and Juan Oinada October 22, 1957, with Bill Savage, Def. Herb Freeman and Nick Kozak March 13, 1958, lost to Nelson Royal and Black Hawk May 6, 1958. The August 24th Raw with Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Vince McMahon's birthday did a 3.93 rating. We'll have more details on it next week. The August 21st SmackDown rating was up to a 1.9 rating and 3.18 million viewers for the show headlined by the Hardys and John Morrison vs. CM Punk and the Hart Dynasty. Impact on August 20th did a 1.17 rating and 1.6 million viewers, doing a 0.83 in males 18 to 34 and 1.05 in males 35 to 49. The adults male/female breakdown was 69% male. In the segment by segment, the British Invasion vs. Beer Money Street Fight lost 96,000 viewers. The Cody Deaner ODB Mick Foley backstage segment plus 30 seconds Angelina Love vs. Madison Rayne match gained 164,000 viewers. Samoa Joe vs. Homicide lost 41,000 viewers. Awesome Kong vs. Sarita vs. Tracy Brooks vs. Christy Hem gained 27,000 viewers. Pope D'Angelo Dinero vs. Consequences Creed lost 41,000 viewers. The AJ Styles retirement announcement and Sting promo was the big hit on the show, gaining 165,000 viewers to a 1.26 quarter hour. Team 3D vs. Kurt Angle and Matt Morgan gained 27,000 viewers and had the show's peak rating at 1.28. The August 20th Superstars show did a 1.0 rating, somewhat inexplicably, since there was nothing major on the show. The best explanation may have been that the 11 p.m. replay was moved to 2 a.m. The replay usually does a 0.3, and instead did less than a 0.1, so maybe people who usually watch the replay show knew about it and watched the only decent time slot airing. The August 18th ECW show did a 1.2 rating and 1.74 million viewers. Notes from the August 17th Raw, which did a 3.79 rating and 5.53 million viewers. The Kofi Kingston vs. Carlito US title match lost 102,000 viewers. The Miz vs. Evan Bourne lost 219,000 viewers. The return of DX and the Angle with Legacy was a big success, doing a 4.30 quarter and gaining 1,138,000 viewers, which is the best non-overrun segment I can recall in a long time. Mickie James vs. Gail Kim lost 496,000 viewers. Jack Swagger vs. MVP and Chavo Guerrero vs. Hornswoggle with Macaulay Culkin lost 321,000 viewers. John Cena and Randy Orton vs. Chris Jericho and Big Show gained 1,065,000 viewers to a 4.45 overrun. That's also excellent. Basically, the quarter patterns show people were more interested in the main event than usual, probably the idea of Cena and Orton as a team before SummerSlam, but the return of DX is probably the reason the rating was where it was, even though it was essentially the same as the week before. Results. August 11th Tokyo Yoyogi Gym, K1 Japan Grand Prix Tournament, 4,137 sellout, Kazuo Doi b Katsuharu Ebisawa, Kengo Shimizu b Shinkyo Kawano, Yuta Watanabe b Nobuya Ko, Japan Grand Prix First Round, Yuki b Prince Ali, Malvin Mahof b Ramazan Ramazanov, Daniel Gita b John Love, Sergey Lashenko b Sebastian Siobanu, Bryce Duidan b Rico Verhoeven, Semifinals, Daniel Gita b Yuki, Bryce Gaiden b Sergio Lashenko, Kyotaro b Jan Sukup, Peter Ertz b Yosuke Nishijima. Finals, Daniel Gita b Siegel Lashenko. August 15th Ontario, California, Called Out MMA, 3000, Francisco Rivera b Aaron Arana, Hondo Dermanjian b Dustin Rhodes, Kathy Long b Avery Vilke, Brent Cooper b Daniel Hernandez, Jay Silva b Rayleigh Zama, Daniel Puder b Michael Clark, Raphael Davis b Emmanuel Newton, Virgil Zwicker b Will Ritchie, Roman Michian b Mike Dolce, Gabe Rudiger b Wander Braga, Thomas Denny b Joe Cronin. August 15th Bayamon PR, WWC Summer Madness 300, Angel b Zona Rosa, Ricky Reyes b Comandante, Chicky Star b Tommy Diablo, Puerto Rican title, Shane the Glamour Boy b Ricky Ortiz, WWC Tag titles, Sean Spears and Idol Stevens b Thunder and Lightning to win titles, Universal title unification, BJNC Noriega, Ricky Steamboat and Ricky Steamboat Jr. b Orlando Colon and Hiram Tua. August 17th Tehuacan, AAA TV tapings, 6,500 sellout, Rio Bravo and Tito Santana and Tigra Cota b Argenis and Atomic Boy and Ray Lampago, Jack Evans and Alex Koslov b Rocky Romero and Teddy Hart, Elahito and Granda b Joe Lider and Nicho, Street Fight, Billy Boy and Sexy Star b Aerostar and Fabi Apache, Chessman and Cybernetico b Charlie Manson and Marco Corleone, Bull Terrier match, Macias NC Dr. Wagner Jr. August 18th Mexico City Arena, Mexico, CMLL TV tapings, 1,500, Ramstein and Apocalypse Spias Jr. and Bengala Horace and Metallico and Tigre Blanco b Mesala and Caligula and Inquisidor, Pierrotito and Pequeno Black Warrior and Pequeno Damian 666 b Mascarada Dorada and Pequeno Olympico and Ultimo Dragon Cheeto, Byerson Lismark Jr. and Mr. Niebla b La Mascara and El Hijo del Fantasma and Mascara Dorada, Shocker and Toscano and Hector Garza b El Terrible and El Texano Jr. and Efesto DQ. August 18th Noboribatu, All Japan, 1,100 sellout Nozawa won 3-way over Tashiso and Kai, Joe During b Seiya Sanada Manabu Soya and Osamu Nishimura b Taru and Hate, Asoshi Kojima and Hiroshi Yamato b Ryota Hama and Tomoya Suwama and Shuji Kondo b Zodiac and Minoru, Keiji Muto and Kaz Hayashi and Masayuki Kono be Mazada and Yoshihiro Takayama and Minoru Suzuki. August 21st Mexico City Arena, Mexico. CMLL TV tapings, 8,000, Principe and Sensei Bicholo and Zyko, Angel Azteca Jr. and Guerrero Maya Jr. and Starman B. Dr. X and Kid Tigra and Polvora, Lady Apache B. Raven Hirika, Maximo and Metro and Valiente B. Euphoria and Misterioso Jr. and Nosferatu, Rey Mendoza Jr. and Tetsuya Naido and Eugero B. Atlantis and Black Warrior and Ultimo Guerrero DQ, Místico and Blue Panther and La Sombra B. Negro Casas and Felino and Mr. Niebla. August 21st Robstown, Texas, TNA, 1,600, Homicide B. Sheik Abdul Bashir, Sarita B. Angelina Love, Matt Morgan B. Cute Kip Hernandez B. Eric Young tag titles, Booker T and Scott Steiner B. Robert Roode and James Storm non-title, AJ Styles B. Samoa Joe. August 21st Asahi Kawa All Japan, 1,100, Kai D. Seiya Sonata 15 minutes, Ryota Hama B. Hate DQ, Aiden Zodiac and Minoru B. Ryota Hama and Shuji Kondo and Masayuki Kono, Manabu Soya and Osamu Nishimura B. Mazada and Yoshihiro Takayama, Minoru Suzuki and Nozawa B. Hiroshi Yamato and Satoshi Kojima, Keiji Muto and Suwama and Kaz Hayashi B. Taru and Tashiso and Joe During. August 22nd Laredo, TNA, 1,100, Homicide B. Sheik Abdul Bashir, Sarita B. Angelina Love, Matt Morgan B. Cute Kip, Hernandez B. Eric Young non-title, AJ Styles B. Samoa Joe, tag titles, Booker T and Scott Steiner B. Robert Roode and James Storm. August 22nd Kobe, Pro Wrestling Noah, 1,300 sellout, Akira Tao D. Kishin Kawabata, Takeshi Rikio B. Kentaro Shiga, Akitoshi Saito B. Takuma Sano, Genba Hirayanagi 1 Battle Royal, Takashi Sugiura B. Muhammad Yone, Kena Kobashi and Jun Akiyama and Tamon Honda B. Shuhei Taniguchi and Go Shiozaki and Takeshi Morishima. August 22nd Sapporo All Japan, 1,400 sellout Minoru B. Tomoya, Shuji Kondo and Seiya Sonata B. Kaz Hayashi and Kai, Yoshihiro Takayama and Seiya Sonata B. Suwama and Hiroshi Yamato, Satoshi Kojima B. Zodiac DQ, Keiji Muto and Masayuki Kono and Ryota Hama B. Taro and Hate and Joe During. All Asian Tag Team titles, Minoru Suzuki and Nozawa B. Osamu Nishimura and Manabu Soya. August 22nd Mexico City Arena, Mexico, Torium and Dragon Mania, Raven Hirika and Mima Shimoda B. Yuki Kurihara and Marcella, Mascara Dorada 1 4-way over Nitrito, Pequeno Boricua and Pequeno Damian 666, Adam Bridal 1 Dragon Scramble, Solar B. Negro Navarro, Místico and Shocker and Tiger Mask B. Archangel de la Muerte and Atlantis and Ultimo Guerrero, Mask vs. Hair, Ultimo Dragon B. Hajime Ohara. August 23rd Kobe, Dragon Gate 1,450 sellout, Susumu Yokosuka and Kagetora B. Dragon Kid and Akira Tozawa, Cyber Kong and Genki Horiguchi and Ryo Saito B. Don Fuji and Pack and Cyber, Masaaki Mochizuki and Katsuhiko Nakajima B. Yasushi Kanda and Kenichiro Arai Core, Shingo Takagi and Yamato B. Chima and Gamma, Masato Yoshino and BXB Hulk B. Naruki Doi and Naoki Tanizaki. August 23rd Kobe, Pro Wrestling Noah, 1,200 sellout Ricky Marvin D. Taiji Ishimori 15 minutes, Kishin Kawabata B. Genba Hirayanagi, Akira Tao and Yoshinari Ogawa B. Akitoshi Saito and Takuma Sano, Takeshi Morishima and Tamon Honda B. Kena and Akihiko Ito, Takeshi Rikio and Muhammad Yone B. Yoshinobu Kanemaru and Kotaro Suzuki, Go Shiozaki B. Akitoshi Saito, Kena Kobashi and Jun Akiyama B. Shuhei Taniguchi and Takashi Sugiura. August 23rd Hamaguchi, All Japan, 1,100 sellout, Zodiac B. Manabu Soya, Osamu Nishimura B. Hate, Suwama and Masayuki Kono B. Taru and Tashiso, Yoshihiro Takayama and Nozawa B. Shuji Kondo and Ryota Hama, Minoru and Joe During B. Minoru Suzuki and Mazada, Keiji Muto and Kaz Hayashi and Seiya Sonata B. Satoshi Kojima and Hiroshi Yamato and Kai. August 23rd Mexico City Arena Coliseo, CMLL TV tapings, Molotov and Trueno B. Gamora and Semental Escandalo and Nitro and Polvora B. Delta and Starman and Tigre Blanco, Amapola and Princesa Blanca and Seductora B. Estrella Magica and Uvia and Marcella, El Hijo del Fantasma and Mascara Dorada and Sagrado B. Tetsuya Naido and Eugero and Shigeo Okamura, Atlantis and Negro Casas and Ultimo Guerrero B. Hector Garza and Místico and La Mascara. August 24th Las Vegas, WWE Raw/Superstars TV tapings, 8,500 Jamie Noble B. Alex Riley, Jack Swagger B. Primo Colon, The Miz B. Santino Marella, Alicia Fox and Beth Phoenix and Rosa Mendez B. Mickey James and Kelly Kelly and Gail Kim, Non-title, Mark Henry and MVP beat Chris Jericho and Big Show. Boxing, Hornswoggle beat Chavo Guerrero. DQ, no DQ, Vince McMahon and Triple H and Shawn Michaels beat Randy Orton and Ted DiBiase and Cody Rhodes. August 25th, Phoenix, WWE SmackDown/ECW/Superstars TV tapings, Goldust for Sheamus, Yoshitatsu and Tyler Rex beat Shelton Benjamin and Zack Ryder. Non-title, William Regal beat Christian, Paul Burchill beat Hurricane Helms. Dolph Ziggler won three-way over Mike Knox and Rey Mysterio. Matt Hardy and John Morrison beat David Hart Smith and Tyson Kidd. Melina beat Layla, IC title. Rey Mysterio beat Kane. DQ. Chris Jericho and Big Show beat Crime Time. Cage match for world title. CM Punk beat Jeff Hardy. Shawn Michaels and Triple H and John Cena beat Randy Orton and Ted DiBiase and Cody Rhodes. Special thanks to Dan Ackerman, Dan Alegria, Brian Alvarez, Stephen Ash, David Bixenspan, Patrick Brandmeier, Kurt Brown, Thomas Burnett, Ted Butrin, Alan Kajilik, Graham Cameron, Michael Carpenter, Jeff Cohen, Alan Cownahan, Mike Zobit, Jimmy Daniel, Brendan Donahue, David Farmer, Michael Fitzgerald, Nick Fugit, Aaron Goff, Manuel Gonzalez, Larry Goodman, Jeff Gorman, Tim Grief, Bradley Grover, Bruce Grummert, James Gutman, Al Haft, Brian Henke, Shelton Hull, Mike Kuzmuk, Andrew Larson, Keith Lipinski, Michael Langan, Ed Laredo, Alex Merves, Joe McDonald, Blake Norton, Creighton Rabs, Ryan Rosenthal, Ricky Schmidt, Mark Schreiner, Mike Sempervive, Charles Short, Steve Dr. Lucha Sims, Steve Stone, John Sutherland, James Stanios, Dan Wallers, Jeremy Warneck, David Wills, Pete Wilson, Chris Youngblood, Chris Elner. CMLL. Before their hair versus mask match at the anniversary show next month, Místico and Negro Casas have a singles match on August 30th at Arena Coliseo with Místico defending the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title, stemming from Casas pinning Místico clean in the third fall of the August 23rd main event. Casas and Atlantis and Ultimo Guerrero over Místico and Garza and La Mascara. Ultimo Dragon held his annual Dragon Mania show on August 22nd at Arena Mexico. Main event was Ultimo Dragon beating Hajime Ohara in a mask versus hair match, so Ohara got his head shaved. It was pushed as a teacher versus student match. Tiger Mask came in from New Japan to team with Místico and Shocker over Arcangel de la Muerte and Atlantis and Ultimo Guerrero. The major TV taping, which this week saw the first three matches as opposed to the main matches air live on Televisa Deportes Network, drew 8,000 fans. Tiger Mask was backstage at the show but didn't work on the card. Maximo came out wearing a mask designed like the old Brazos matches in the 80s. Rey Mendoza Jr. and Tetsuya Naido and Eugero beat Black Warrior and Atlantis and Ultimo Guerrero in two straight falls, with the second fall coming via DQ when Warrior gave Eugero a low blow and was caught by the referee. The focus was to build toward a Eugero versus Warrior hair versus hairs match. Místico and Blue Panther and La Sombra beat Casas and Felino and Mr. Niebla in a three-fall match that lasted less than 8 minutes. Místico pinned Casas clean in the third fall in just 53 seconds of the fall using La Magistral, Casas' own move against him. Místico came out wearing the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title belt. He challenged Casas to a mask versus hair match at the anniversary show, and Casas accepted. August 28th has Místico and Sombra and Volador Jr. versus Atlantis and Felino and Niebla and Eugero and Naido and Mendoza Jr. versus Guerrero and Blue Panther and Black Warrior. AAA. All the problems last week with Televisa have been smoothed out and they were back on the air on August 23rd, airing the show that was supposed to have aired the prior Sunday, taped on August 7th, so they are a week behind in their cycle, which means they are building up Verano de Escándalo angles after the show has already taken place. The first TV taping after Verano de Escándalo is August 30th in Tlalnepantla with a cage match where the first man who gets out gets a shot at the Cruiserweight title, and the last guy left has to leave town, with Jack Evans, Extreme Tiger, Rocky Romero, Teddy Hart, Alex Koslov and Sugi-san and Cibernetico versus Mesias. The August 17th tapings in Tehuacan drew a sellout 6,500 for a Bull Terrier, dog collar, match with Mesias versus Dr. Wagner Jr. Cibernetico attacked both men. With all the controversy over Silver King and his mask at Triple Mania this year, the IWRG promotion, in Naucalpan, on August 20th, within the Distrito Federal, had a show called the Festival of Masks where wrestlers who had lost their masks were allowed to wear them for the show, including Villano 3, Scorpio Jr., Mascara Año 2000 and others. The show was to honor 70s and 80s star El Matematico. Puerto Rico. The big show of the Summer Madness weekend was August 15th in Bayamon, drawing only 300 fans in the 4,500-seat Papan Cestero Arena, even with Ricky Steamboat being brought in to team with his son in the main event. Steamboat and Steamboat Jr. beat Orlando Colon and Hiram Tua when Steamboat Jr. pinned Tua with a flying crossbody. Best match was a unique unification match. Noriega held the Universal title in August of 2008 and quit the promotion over a money dispute without dropping the title. BJ is the current champion, having beaten Steve Corino. When Corino left the promotion, they brought in Noriega for the new feud, billing it as champion versus champion. They did a dusty finish as the first ref was knocked down. Then a second ref came out, and Noriega hit BJ with a chair and pinned him with the second ref counting. But the first ref had recovered and saw the chair shot. It ended up with the commission involved, and they said the title would be held up pending a rematch. Idol Stevens and Shawn Spears won the WWC tag titles from Thunder and Lightning when Idol knocked out Lightning with brass knucks. Shane the Glamour Boy, Shane Sewell, kept the Puerto Rican title, pinning Ricky Ortiz, who debuted after being let go by WWE. Ortiz has totally changed his look, cutting his hair and wearing trunks basically as a copy of Batista. He now looks like a slow sort of big guy with no look or charisma. Basically, he's so completely different from his OVW days, it's not funny. He's able to still use the Ricky Ortiz name because Carlos Colon is the WWE's local promoter in Puerto Rico, so they don't stick it to them over the names, even though the name is a WWE creation. Chicky Star also pinned Tommy Diablo to retain his crown as the King of Wrestling. IWA had its Golpe de Estadio Tour big event on August 16 in Catano with several title changes. Dean Ross beat AP Dynamite to become champion of the War promotion in Ecuador. Bacano beat Chris Joel to win their Puerto Rican title. Chicano and Bryan beat the Arabian Connection to win the IWA tag titles. Diabolico beat Rick Stanley in a cage match to keep their IC title, and Joe Bravo beat Savio Vega to win the held-up IWA title. AJ Castillo, third-generation wrestler, son of Huracan Castillo Jr., has debuted. Dragon Gate. Biggest show of the week was August 23 in Kobe before a sellout 1,450 fans with a series of tag tournament matches. Susumu Yokosuka and Kagetora beat Dragon Kid and Akira Tozawa. Masaaki Mochizuki and Katsuhiko Nakajima beat Yasushi Kanda and Kenichiro Arai via count out. Shingo Takagi and Yamato beat Chima and Gamma when Yamato used the sleeper on Gamma, and Masato Yoshino and BXB Hulk beat Naruki Doi and Naoki Tanizaki when Yoshino pinned Doi. Hustle. The promotion announced it would be starting a new era on October 10 with a show at Sumo Hall. President Nobuo Yamaguchi announced they are going for the storyline-oriented fighting opera, which is essentially a spoof on pro wrestling, that got a cult following but never drew compared to the money spent trying to get it over, and will be doing professional fighting, which I'm presuming to mean a style more like the other Japanese wrestling companies. However, King Ricky, singer Ricky Takeuchi, 45, a movie actor who is so famous, will be the lead heel in the role of the guy leading the heels trying to destroy Hustle. The next show will be August 27 at Korakuen Hall with a more wrestling-oriented main event of Jushin Liger and Shiro Koshinaka and Yuji Nagata versus Genichiro Tenryu and Toshiaki Kawada and Tajiri. It will be Liger and Nagata's debut in Hustle. In an interesting trivia note, it will also be the first time Kawada and Liger have ever faced each other as pro wrestlers. The two met once in 1981 in the high school national tournament at 165 pounds, which Kawada ended up winning. All Japan. Minoru Suzuki and Nozawa retained the All-Asian Tag Team titles, beating Osamu Nishimura and Manabu Soya in 29-37 when Nozawa pinned Soya with La Magistral. Pro Wrestling Noah. They had a special show on August 22 in Kobe before a full house of 1,300 where Kenta Kobashi and Jun Akiyama and Tamon Honda beat Go Shiozaki and Takeshi Morishima and Shuhei Taniguchi in a version of the Last Generation vs. Current Generation, where Honda pinned Taniguchi in 33-01. Not sure the logic in Honda pinning Taniguchi at this point in time. They did a second show in the same arena on August 23 with a sellout 1,200 with Kobashi and Akiyama as a tag team on top, beating Taniguchi and Takashi Sugiura in 24-36 when Akiyama pinned Sugiura with an exploder. That show went head-to-head with the Dragon Gate show. Steve Anthony, 31, a former WLW champion sent by Harley Race, debuts on the September tour, which also includes Bison Smith and Bobby Fish. Yes, another 3-foreigner tour. The big thing they are pushing is that Anthony beat current GHC heavyweight champ Shiozaki in a tag team match in Sedalia, Missouri. Added to September 12 at Korakuen Hall are singles matches with Akitoshi Saito vs. Morishima. Saito should win since he's getting the next title shot at Shiozaki, and Smith vs. Kensuke Sasaki. Added to September 21 in Nagoya is Kobashi and Akiyama and Akira Tao and Yoshinari Ogawa vs. Shiozaki and Sugiura and Takeshi Rikyo and Muhammad Yone. New Japan. The injury to Hiroshi Tanahashi didn't come from Shinsuke Nakamura doing the Boma-Yi, as is being said publicly. It was on a spot where Tanahashi was behind him for a German suplex and Nakamura stopped it by head-butting backwards and a sick high kick. His nose was bloody and his eye and cheek started swelling at that point. In the tournament, when it came down to the tie for first place in the A block with Hiroshi Tanahashi, Togi Makabe, and Masato Tanaka, the decision was made first based on head-to-head standings. Since Tanahashi and Makabe both beat Tanaka in their matches and Tanahashi drew with Makabe, Tanaka was eliminated, not via coin toss. The coin toss was because Tanahashi and Makabe were tied, and had a draw in their match. At that point they had a coin toss to determine who went into the Final Four as the top seed. Makabe won, and thus his first place winner, got the second place winner in the B block in Takashi Sugiura in the semifinals, and Tanahashi got B block winner Nakamura. Akebono appears on the September 12th show in Chiba, teaming with Yuji Nagata against Giant Bernard and Carl Anderson. Chima and Don Fuji from Dragon Gate come to the September 27th show in Kobe, facing Manabu Nakanishi and Akira. Other Japan notes. Seiko Yamamoto, 28, the younger sister of Kid Yamamoto, got a lot of pub this weekend for winning the Pite Lesinski Invitational, one of the biggest amateur wrestling tournaments of the year, in the 130-pound weight class on August 14th in Myslovis, Poland. Yamamoto won 4 world championships, the most recent in 2003, but had been beaten out for her spot in the 2004 Olympics by Sahori Yoshida, who had been considered for the past several years as the best pound-for-pound wrestler in the world, who won gold medals in both 2004 and 2008. Yamamoto retired in 2006, got married to Hideaki Nagashima, one of Japan's best handball players, and had a baby. She had been training at her brother's gym and announced last month she would be making a comeback in an attempt to make the 2012 Olympic team. Yamamoto beat Mariana Shistine of Hungary 2-0 to capture the championship. The other national star from Japan who competed in the tournament, Kyoko Hamaguchi, son of Anno Hamaguchi, placed 5th at 158 pounds and was crying heavily when it was over, because it's become obvious she's now past her prime as a wrestler after being dominant in the early part of the decade in her weight class. It's one of her worst performances in international competition, and being 3 years older by the time of the next Olympics makes things more difficult. Asia Kong beat Dynamite Kansai on August 16th at Korakuen Hall with 5 Uraken spinning back fists, to win the Oz Academy Championship on the Plum Mariko Memorial Show. And in a throwback to about 15 years ago, Kong was then challenged by Manami Toyota. The return of the 90s Hardcore Wings promotion on August 21st in Tokyo was a disaster, drawing only 150 fans for one-star Kanemaru versus Mr. Pogo. Pogo won with a brainbuster through a pane of glass being held up by 2 chairs. He went to blow fire at Kanemaru. The original one-staring version of Jason the Terrible, if it was the original, that's Roberto Rodriguez, made the save. Here and there. Cobo Arena in Detroit, the home of Pro Wrestling Forever, including being the base of operations for the Sheik's big-time wrestling in a boom period in the late 60s and early 70s, will be getting demolished on October 1st. The city has larger and more modern arenas. WWE and WCW also ran shows in that arena, even though both sides ran more often at the larger Joe Louis Arena. UFC drew its first major arena sellout crowd and what was then a record $300,000 gate in 1996 in that arena for the unbelievably horrible second Dan Severn vs. Ken Shamrock match. I saw Ken Shamrock on Inside MMA in July and somehow that match came up and he said, Dan talks about it being this great tactical battle of wills. Actually, it was the worst fight in history. Jushin Liger will be coming to the U.S. for the High Spots Wrestling Convention on January 29th and January 30th in Los Angeles. Liger will wrestle on a Ring of Honor show on January 29th and a PWG show on January 30th. I believe RVD will be wrestling during that weekend as well, but RVD is committed to doing the convention. Dwayne Johnson's animated movie, Planet 51, will be released Thanksgiving, which co-stars the voice of Jessica Biel. The next major project he'll be pushing, Tooth Fairy, is currently scheduled for a January release. Congrats to longtime reader Houston Mitchell on his appointment as assistant sports editor of the Los Angeles Times. He has been with the newspaper for 18 years. He's been a huge help to us both personally and professionally over the years, both in the Hall of Fame, he is Sports Hall of Fame expert, and as far as career decisions on my end, including opening the door for me in doing MMA writing for the Los Angeles Times website at a time when no major newspaper was giving the sport regular coverage. He was also the impetus for the Times to regularly cover it, even though just about everyone over the age of 40 were negative on it. He's just a great guy and the type of person you would want in that kind of a position on the newspaper. Best wishes to the family of Doug Furnace, who was part of one of the 90s best tag teams with partner Dan Crawford aka Phil LaFon. The two came to WWE late in their careers when Crawford, one of the most underrated workers of the past 25 years, was in bad shape with knee and shoulder problems, and worked a lot with Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith when the latter were tag champs. Furnace was also a college football star at the University of Tennessee and later a powerlifting world record holder in the 80s, who at 260 pounds had powerlifting totals in both the bench press 600 and squat 980, bigger than 400-pound Mark Henry. His wife Marty had open heart surgery this past week to remove a tumor. She is fine now, but it was a very scary period as she nearly bled to death from the first surgery and needed a second surgery. She is now out of the hospital. A correction on a correction when it regards history. When we did the biggest crowd by year in the July 13th issue and listed the top U.S. crowd of 1937 to a Jim Londos versus George Pankow match in Baltimore, another historian found a similar crowd for Yvonne Robert versus Everett Marshall in Philadelphia that year, which matched the AWA and MWA World Champions in a match that went 99 minutes to a draw. The match was a non-title match because Philadelphia recognized Bronco Nagurski as world champion at the time. But the match didn't draw all that well. Regarding former Vancouver promoter Al Tomko, who passed away, it should be noted that Strikeforce announcer Mauro Ranallo got his start as the announcer for Tomko's All-Star Wrestling television show. Brian Linder, 35, a Carolinas independent wrestler, who was the assistant principal at Whitlock Junior High School in his hometown of Gaffney, South Carolina, died in a vehicle accident late on August 22. Linder and 3 others were driving in a truck at 2:45 a.m. Saturday night when the crash took place. The other 3 were treated and released from the hospital. Police said high speed and alcohol played a part in the accident. Linder began working indies in 2000 after being trained by the Italian Stallion. He had started this past week in his new post at the school after being hired over the summer, working the first 4 days of school. Michelle Kelly, a member of the Canadian Olympic team in skeleton, she will compete in the Winter Games next year in Vancouver, which is a form of sled racing, worked with Lance Storm on AM Canada, similar to the Today Show in the U.S. airing on CTV. The connection is that they asked Kelly, who grew up and lives in Calgary, what she would be doing if she wasn't going to the Olympics, and she said she would be a pro wrestler. So CTV called Storm and asked him to train her for a television skit. Storm noted in his blog that he only had 2 hours or less to train her for a skit, and was worried because he's seen things in the past and they usually end up as comedy. He said what helped is that Kelly had trained 10 years ago for Wrestling with the Hearts and she was a gymnast when she was younger. Storm put her over, saying she was a sweetheart and fantastic, instantly likable. He said he kept the wrestling simpler than she wanted, but both he and the producers of the piece were scared of her getting an injury that could hamper her Olympic preparation. The piece is expected to air next year about the time of the Olympics. Mike Graham has purchased a new 200-seat restaurant called Water's Edge in Weeki Wachee, Florida with wife Diane. The restaurant caters to bikers and has no cover charge live music. On the 1999 ESPN Outside the Lines special, which interviewed Melanie Pillman, talking about Brian's use of HGH and showing documentation he got it from Dr. Edmund Chain of the Palm Springs Life Extension Institute, who Melanie Pillman said Brian was turned on to from Hogan, who was talked about at the time as being under investigation. Dr. Chain is still around prescribing GH for anti-aging. The rapper Cameron has put out a new album and the lead single is called Ric Flair. On the current season of Big Brother, the contestant voted out on August 13th named Jesse, had talked on the show of wanting to be a pro wrestler. He was described as being muscular, but short, and when voted out, said, "It's okay. I'm going to be a sports entertainer," and started posing like Hogan. Reese Hoffa, a U.S. shot putter, his 73-7 putt is the 11th best in history and he was world champion in 2007, was talked about by commentators over the weekend at the World Track and Field Championships as being a big WWF fan, and they said he had done some of that. He's from Georgia, but I've never heard of him doing any pro wrestling. Bill Goldberg, 42, appearing this past week as a celebrity at the Jimmy V Celebrity Golf Classic, which benefits cancer research. Goldberg goes every year. When asked about coming back to pro wrestling, said, "Not in a million years," but then did say he would be open to wrestling in Japan. He just finished filming another season of Bull Run. While not wanting it publicized, Goldberg was bowing out of activities over the weekend to visit with children with cancer at the hospital they were benefiting as opposed to attending the festivities associated with the tournament. Jacob Kidd, who played with Goldberg, noted that he couldn't want to get off the golf course after he played. He was asked if he wanted to shower and change clothes, and he said he didn't want to miss a minute where he could be spending time with the kids. An update on Emily Ketcher, the 3-year-old daughter of Steve Gatorwolf. She came through brain surgery well, but was in ICU for a few days and still needs heart surgery after a stroke. An appearance of former Cleveland Browns star Bob Golick at a Pro Wrestling Ohio show on August 9th in Cleveland drew 1,500 fans. Golick was brought in with an angle teased with him and local wrestler Mike Toller. Golick also appeared on the TV show Saved by the Bell after his NFL career ended. Greg Valentine and Jim Neidhart worked as a tag team, but Valentine has a severe knee injury and needed crutches, so he couldn't do much of anything. Also appearing on the show was Oscar, who was the former manager of Men on a Mission in WWF in the mid-90s, in his same role as a rapping manager. Matt Riviera, just known as Matt, an Arkansas-based independent wrestler for a promotion run by Bill Ash, is a regular on the currently airing VH1 reality show Megan Wants a Millionaire.